Happy Wednesday, Andrew.
Happy Thursday, apparently. Yeah.
I was telling David, at least this is the one time you get good news where you have one day less to work this week, right?
That is true. That is true. For context, I was eating some chicken.
You were late.
I was eating some chicken and Chris texted me, he said, "Are you coming?" And I was like, "Coming to what?" And it was in that exact moment I found out that today is in fact not Wednesday.
Because you were just sitting in the drive-thru at Popeyes doing burnouts.
Dude, that sounds like
Eating
so
chicken.
good. I would love a biscuit.
Oh, what's new with you guys?
Busy.
Are you guys launching a new version of Podia?
I don't know. Did it get announced?
Wow.
There's a bunch of that going around. I can't talk about something yet because it's not announced yet.
Well, I logged in. I forget why I logged in. The prompt was like, you want to migrate to a new version?
Then yes.
So yes, apparently something is public enough for customers.
Yes. I couldn't remember what the state of it is, but yeah, that's true. If you are a customer, it was invite only and now everyone can do it. So
nice.
Yep. We've been working for the past year on a new version of the app.
Claude could have done it in a week.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Sure, buddy. Challenge that. But
Make a better Podia, no mistakes.
Yeah. But I don't know, it'll be good. I'm excited.
Well, a couple questions. Is it going smoothly? And then, like, is this kind of a feature flagged version of it that you're running both copies or, both things? And how are you managing that? Just curious.
To answer your question, yes, we are running both versions. Like, for instance, when you logged in, you saw the existing version, and then you have the option to migrate to the new one. And it's a lot of different structure. How we're managing it is we were doing it with just Flipper. And then we have this concept called flags that we put on the user and students. So, for example, like when you have a dismissible banner alert, and whenever you dismiss that, we don't want it to like show back up right after you've dismissed it. It's dismissed permanently. And so what we do is we have a array on some of our objects that's called flags, and it stores, if you click that dismiss button, will flag your account that you have hidden this thing. And so originally we were using Flipper, but now we're using that flagging system to basically say, has this site been migrated? If they have been, this is what they see. If not, this is where they go.
Are you routing to same application, different controllers, different URLs, different application? Is there any like data? I assume because you have to like click the migration thing and it does some work. I'm assuming it's like also migrating data too.
Yes. It's the same application. There are some different underlying data structures. So when you do the migration, we do a bunch of data things. And then we basically have like a whole new like module in the app. It's in several places, not just in like the controllers, but we have a module that a lot of this stuff has gone under, and it is a different URL structure.
Cool.
So far, it's been going pretty smoothly from what I've heard. I think what really helped is this newer version is much more focused on people. And like in this age of AI, like we're kind of hedging on like the human connection being the thing that people will eventually be paying for, like not eventually be paying for, they already will and are paying for it. But on top of like what we already offer, we're making a much more like unified experience to talk to people and post things and share courses and things like that. So
your agents are going to be buying courses from other agents. You're going to put your agent in a mastermind group and it just pays $10K a month and gets super smart. And you just sit back and play video games.
And I just get dumber. The thing that I think really helped is that a few weeks ago, we did like a dog fooding day where we only used Podia. Like no Slack, no anything else. Like we just...
for internal...
Yeah,
everything.
so the entire company, all we did is use Podia for the day. And by doing that, we found a lot of issues ourselves. And I think like that day we were dog feeding, I had like 10 PRs at least, and like several issues just I was able to close. And I think that helped a lot. Like we got a lot of things we found doing this incremental system where you let some people in like slowly and have like very like strong communication with them to resolve anything that they find. But from what I understand, I think it's going very well.
Cool. That's always a big moment, especially something you've worked on for like a year or more. And then you also get the benefit of like, it's not day one, you turn it over and the entire product is switched and people log in and they're like, what the hell is this? And can't find my stuff anymore. My workflows are different and whatever. Like that's quite a big move for the customer's benefit, for your customers, Podias customers. That makes sense to like let them opt in and choose to change it and check out the new version. And then they're not just freaked out one day where everything is different. But I guess you guys also get the benefit of that too, where it's like, yeah, you know what, we do have to maintain 2 versions of this app, but we can also slowly move people over. And then that way it's like, use it ourselves, get to the power users, get the other 10% of random people and roll it out over time. And like, hopefully when you get to the big push of like, let's get the last 75% of people migrated or whatever, then it's like hopefully pretty solid or whatever. Hopefully you've teased out a lot of the issues.
Yeah, I think there's a few more things we want to add that weren't like critical to it running, but we just want to add them. And I think
it's always the case. I don't think that ever ends, does it?
No, that never ends. But we wanted to make sure that when we do the full launch, that some other things are included as well that I think our customers are really, really going to enjoy. So
sweet.
Yeah.
That's fun.
It's been a blast.
It's nice to have that moment where things finally go out to production and it's like not just this year of work that feels incomplete and not fulfilling. And then it starts to really like, oh, people love this new thing or whatever. At least you get some conclusion to that.
Yeah, it's been a big undertaking, but I think it's pretty slick, actually. I mean, the fact that we were able to just not even use other apps and just use Podia for that entire day, like kind of solidified it for me.
That is cool.
I mean, we didn't even need Slack with the chat features and stuff. So it's exciting.
That is really cool. That unlocks a lot of stuff for you guys to be able to, it's not like you're selling courses as employees. Some of you might or whatever, but not the entire team and whatever. So you don't get to dog food the product and like feel the frustrations every day, which can be really, really frustrating, but allow you to really polish the stuff that needs to be polished. Like for us, we don't use GoRails because we're making the content, so we don't watch our own videos on GoRails. So that doesn't mean like we'll notice those things, but we do use Hatchbox every day. And so like those frustrating things there, yeah, they drive me up a wall. So I can then prioritize them or whatever. And it goes a long ways to making a polished product, I think. That's cool that now Podia is in a position to do that for you guys. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming, right? But it'll be nice to not have to be like, oh, well, I got to make sure that this feature is hidden behind this thing because this can't go out and this existing system needs to continue to work. And, all these things you have to juggle. And I don't even want to think about the cleanup of like, we got so much code we can delete now. That'll be really nice. But
yeah, I was going to ask about that. I was like, is there any idea of like a time deadline of like, all right, if you haven't upgraded your back end by this date, like say 6 months from now, we're just going to give you an email a month ahead of time and say, hey, in 30 days, if you don't upgrade, we're going to have to do it for you, kind of thing. I would imagine that's part of the plan because you don't want to have to maintain 2 versions forever. And it's not like Basecamp where they've got like Basecamp Classic as a separate Rails app from Basecamp 2 and whatever. I guess 3 and 4 were kind of evolved into the same thing. And I think Basecamp 5 is going to do the same thing. But that living in the same Rails app, I would imagine The goal is to clear out that technical debt at some point, so you only have one copy of things, because there's probably an awful lot of code that you'll have a very awesome PR that's like, remove all the old crap, and it's like delete 20,000 lines of code or something.
Yeah, we do have a date where everyone's going to be switched over. I don't know if it's been announced yet, so I'm not going to say when that is. But yes, at one point, everyone will be moved over, and then we'll start the cleanup.
Are you tired of babysitting your job queues? Let us do it for you. JudoScale monitors and autoscales your job queues so you can stop babysitting and get back to coding. We support Sidekick, SolidQ, GoodJob, and just about every other job backend in Rubyland. And of course, we autoscale your web services too. JudoScale scales up your apps faster than any other autoscaler, so request timeouts and backed up job queues are mitigated before they become a problem. JudoScale has a free plan you can use forever, so there's literally no risk, whether you're on Heroku, AWS, Render, or any other cloud platform. Visit judoscale.com and get your job queues under control.
Hopefully the cleanup goes well, because I feel like sometimes it's not super clear what is deletable and what isn't, and it's not really easy to get everything, but you can always clear stuff out over time too, as you discover like, it looks like this is being used, but actually it was overridden here, and there's a different helper with the same name that lives here, and that's the one we're using instead. Sometimes those are weird little cases.
I think we did a pretty good job of like slicing it up. There's still going to be like, is this being used? Is it not being used for a little bit? But a lot of the backend model in terms of the database didn't really change. I mean, a lot of it was added. There was more added to it, but a lot of the cleanup's mostly going to be in the UI and the components and the controllers and things like that. And one thing that I was very like stringent about is that we have different like sections of the app. Like it's a multi-tenant app. So like your site is like hosted on chris.podia.com, where you can use a custom domain for that. But because of that, we have a lot of like slices of the app that we have to kind of maintain and contend to. And there was a lot of decorator use previously. And one thing that I was very stringent about was like using less and less decorators and like trying to put as much into the components instead, until it doesn't make sense, right? You know, at some point it doesn't make sense to rewrite a certain piece of code, but for as much as possible, it's like that'll make the cleanup easier too, because then it's like, well, we know this is being used because it's in this component, like it's right here. We don't have to go hunting for, is this decorator method being used? Where is it being used? Like, is someone calling send on it? Or is there meta program somehow? Like, it's a lot easier to do a lot of that cleanup when you're like, okay, let's just put the code as close as possible to where it's being used. And that's at least what I have been doing. I can't say that's a universal pattern or anything, but that was one thing that I was specifically like, okay, let's do it like this. Also, direct routes came in handy a lot, because then you can have like that single component and use the direct routes to then route certain paths, or based on the user type or whatever, a certain way. And then you have even less like of that logic that you need to maintain.
Man, direct routes, I always forget what they are. And I have to go reread the docs like every time, because for whatever reason, just does not set as a concept in my brain.
I was actually going to ask, because like I'm not sure I've heard that term or know what you mean by direct routes. So what is that? I don't think I've seen that before.
So Rails has a way to do these things called direct routes. And it makes a lot of sense in this like multi-tenant situation, right? So let's say you have a blog post component, right? And whenever a user of a specific type is looking at it, when you click a button, that routes one way, like to the tenant part of the application that they're supposed to be on. But if you're like the admin or like the owner of that, then it may get routed another way to the kind of admin section of the application. And then if you're not logged in at all, you may want to route it somewhere else, right? So what a direct route will do is allow you to say, all right, this is what I call the post path. This is the post path. It can specify arguments. And then you can do things in that where you're like, if current.user is a admin, do return this route. If current.user is not an admin, do this. And if there is no current.user, do this. And so you keep all that conditional logic in that route, in that direct route, instead of it being in your application code. And what that allows you to do is, previously we had, based on the slice, we would have module name and then blog post component. And then for the other slice, it would be module name, blog post component. So we're maintaining two different versions, and a lot of them were simply because of different routes being used. And so what these direct routes allowed us to use is specifically like the components, because that's where I found it to be the most useful, is to have a single top level component for my blog post component. And it doesn't need to know who's looking at it or what actions are available to it, because the routes you can handle that in the direct routes. So instead of having this conditional inside of every single component, like, because if you imagine a blog post component, it might have a comment component underneath it, and it might have an image component, and it has the body component, and it has avatars, and it has actions for admins like deleting and reporting and editing. You should only be able to edit if you're the owner of that thing, right? And you shouldn't be able to report it if you're the owner of that thing. And so, like, you have a single top level component that's handling a lot of underlying rendering. You can kind of imagine where it's like, okay, well, instead of having, I would have to put that conditional logic in all of those other components too, right? Or start passing things around from the top level. And instead, you can not do any of that and just use a direct route, say post path, and that post path knows the context that it's supposed to be used in.
I don't know if it's the naming of it being direct. Something about that doesn't really map to anything in my brain when I read that. If you look at the docs for it, direct routes are really just, here's a custom route and you give it a name, and then it receives the whatever you pass to it, like a active record object. And then you just fill out a callback, like a function that returns the route it should go to. So then that way you can use the context of like, I am logged in as an admin, so I want to render this out to the admin blog path actually, instead of the public blog path or whatever. So it's really just like a function where you can make your own routing helpers and they can have logic in them, as opposed to just a straight, this path name goes to this controller in action. So it's really helpful for anything like that, where you need it to be like, or you want a dynamic one that's like, depending on the user role, let's have this do X, Y, or Z. You'll probably still need certain things of like, you need to still only display the edit blog post path to authors or admins or whatever. But when it comes to routes that might need to be customized, because I'm guessing you still need regular old routes, because like your admin version of the blog post render or the HTML is going to render out like a view link, and it's going to be the public viewing link. And that may be only rendered if you're at the looking at it as an admin or something, because public doesn't need to see that. But you get kind of the best of both worlds there, where you can have like a version of that link or that path that is dynamic, where you can just have it contextually available or whatever.
And it works really well with current attributes as well. So then you can put an even less logic in, and I can just call post path the way I think I should be able to call post path and pass it a post and params if I want. And then inside the logic for the direct route, it can then make decisions on its own without me giving it extra context. Like maybe it just uses context from the actual object I gave it. Is post published, then do this route. If the post is not published, then we need to take you to the draft route, for instance. So
yeah, that's really a good example. Yeah, because then your helper is just one typical helper, but then you can like have those separate pages for the draft version or the published version or preview or whatever it is. Because a couple of the examples are helpful too, or it's like you can have a commentable path and you give it a record, but it could look at or it could actually take you to like the parent record that the comment is on, like a blog post, and then automatically set an anchor in the URL to scroll you down to the comment. Because the comment doesn't necessarily have a page itself. The comment's actually only visible through the project, the blog post, the whatever the comment is on. So that's a cool little thing where you could build your own function that says, okay, you gave me a comment, but the actual URL this needs to go to is going to entirely depend on the parent. But then we can also scroll you down to the comment with an anchor in that URL too, or maybe some query params or something. Lots of actually really neat things you can do with it. But that feels like one of those Rails things I did not learn for many years. And I was like, I wish I would have known this sooner. I don't know if it's just the naming or what. I would think of like naming that like a custom route or something, not direct for some reason. Because direct to me is like comment /1 or something, like directly to that specific comment. But it's not in that context.
It's almost like a director. It's directing you to the right path from like a top level.
That's a good way of explaining it. Yeah.
Does that make sense, David? That
it's a router.
Well?
Yeah.
A router's router. When production breaks, you want to quickly understand and fix it, not sift through logs for the next hour. That's where Honeybadger comes in. Honeybadger notifies you of errors and outages and puts performance in context to help you fix the issue faster. Learn more at honeybadger.io. That's www.honeybadger.io.
I'd never heard of it either until my coworker Kyle, when we were doing some work, we were rewriting a bunch of components and not only changing the design, but then simplifying them and trying to not make, I don't want to say mistakes, but there was some pain that we wanted to address while we were doing this. And my coworker Kyle was like, we should use these direct routes. And I was like, I've never heard of this. And then when I looked at it, I was like, that would be amazing. Because now instead of like admin block component and regular your public block component, we had a bunch of components like that, which were basically the same component, but under a different module because they were being rendered in different contexts. But the only code in those components was basically just setting the right route variables for the right routes. So if we don't have to do that and we can roll all of this logic up to the direct routes, it made it so much more simple to be like, okay, well, now we can have a single component for this thing because we don't have to worry about the context. And like Chris said earlier, yeah, you still will have to do a little bit of checking, right? But like I said kind of earlier, that logic is right next to where it's being used versus having to remember, oh, well, when I called this component, I told it needed to use this route, and I had to pass that all the way down like 7 layers deep to the action in a dropdown that's rendered in a comment on that post, right? So it's pretty slick. I originally was like concerned that it was going to become like a dumping ground and become unmaintainable, but I think we did a really good job of like, wait, this is a hammer, right? And if we're not careful, we're going to stub our toe. So let's just be very methodical about what we add here and only do it if it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense, then let's not add a direct route just for the sake of adding the direct route.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you ever used resolve routes?
I have not. I see that literally right here.
Yeah. We'll have a link in the show notes. I have not ever used that, but the cool example it shows is like you could take and create a resolve route that says resolve, and it uses the string of a active record or like a class. So in this case, like resolve user. From that block, you return like the path to wherever you want to send it. So the example is like you could pass in current user and have it actually resolve to the profile path instead, which is kind of neat. So you could change those objects and say like, instead of going to users, we can have the router actually override that and decide that should go to a different location. And you could probably combine that with current user in some cool ways. So like you could resolve any user model and point it to like users /1, 2, 3, 4, 5, their ID. But you could check and say like, if current user is the user passed into this route, we could send them to like users /me or to my profile or something. So you could like just pull off the current user and do a custom thing for that if you didn't want to send them directly to their like public user profile path or whatever. So that's cool. There's definitely a lot of use cases for these things. Some of this, like Resolve, feels a little bit like less common, very uncommon. I don't know if I've ever used an application that had Resolve in it. I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I feel like I could have used this though, because one of the comments in the docs is it alters the behavior of polymorphic URL. And I remember a feature specifically where I was like, oh, don't worry, dude. Like, we're going to be able to solve this problem easily because we'll just use polymorphic routes. And we tried to use the polymorphic route and it was not what we wanted. And we ended up not using it. And I'm like, if I'd known about this, maybe I could have actually gotten what I wanted.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then, are there any other cool ones in here that... No, it's just the custom URLs module in the routing mapper.
Yeah, it's powerful.
One other thing I want to talk about with Rails that you guys might not have seen, this got merged yesterday into main Rails. There's a new Rails query command. So you can use Active Record to query the database or pass in like a raw SQL. And what's neat about this is it actually runs the query and then returns JSON as a response. So you can use this programmatically to like do I believe it's a read only. Did I see that right?
Yeah, I saw read only.
Yeah, read only.
Yeah, read only. And it does pagination for you automatically and structures the output as JSON. So you get to see the columns returned, the rows, the meta of it. So like how many rows are returned, the query time, page per page has more, true or false, and the actual like SQL query it ran. If you passed in Active Record code, you can see exactly what it generated, which is nice. This seems cool. Like that is something that I will use the Rails console and like poke around and grab data sometimes. But this will like allow you to do that programmatically. So you can then take Ruby or whatever and parse the JSON and have a script that you could do a rake task that runs a Rails query or something and grabs the data and does whatever with it. So I could see this being useful in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I can too. One thing that we have at Podia that I've been starting to use more and more is we have a read-only replica of our database, and we have written custom scripting to allow us to query that directly. And then we have AI skills that you're like, hey, go investigate the database and figure out, how many, like I did the other day to try to figure out a distribution of subscriptions. So like, I was like, go query the database and I needed a detailed report on XY subscriptions and how many are monthly, how many are annual, and the distribution of when they start is their offset. And then I just let it go run and it goes and does it. It's really helpful for debugging as well.
Yeah, that's cool. I like this stuff. These are like really, really, really nice to have features that, unless we talk about them, that can get released in Rails 8.2 or whatever. And then you'll see it as a changelog entry and be like, oh, that's neat. And then forget about it and never use it. And it's like one of those things we just got to make sure we promote, because man, some of these tools are, you don't need them until you need them. But then when you do, it's like, wow, this makes life way easier.
Yeah, this is slick.
Otherwise, you're going to have to write a rake task or something that prints out JSON yourself.
Yeah, and I love JQ. So the fact you can just pipe it straight into JQ, slick.
Yeah, JQ is awesome. Some of the syntax for it is a little wild, but it is really convenient being able to pipe JSON into it.
Super powerful too. If you get into the deeper weeds of it, it is super powerful.
Yeah. Sweet. I'm trying to think. This will be out before or after our announcement, but Monday we're finishing and deploying all of the last bits and announcing our app signal integration in Hatchbox, where we got some shortcuts, which is nice. And I'm surprised no other hosting companies do this. But like now when you connect your Hatchbox app to your AppSignal app, we just have shortcuts to like, here's the errors for your application. Here's the host metrics. So you can see that if your server's running out of resources or whatever. And then what we've got now after you do that is your Rails server, your cron jobs, any other processes like Sidekick or SolidQ, and your database backups can have basically a checkbox. And we use a tool called AppSignal Wrap, which is like a little Rust utility that literally just boots itself up and then boots up your actual cron job or Rails process or whatever, or your database backup script, and then reports automatically to AppSignal and says, here's the logs. If you want, it'll send over the logs. It will contact the check-in. So like you can do for the Rails process, a heartbeat every like 30 seconds. It'll say, hey, we're still running. And if it ever fails, the heartbeat will notify you. And then the cron jobs will say, hey, we're going to check in every hour or whatever. And then if they don't check in and complete within a certain amount of time, so your cron job goes rogue and infinitely runs or something, it'll notify you of that. But yeah, it's nice. Like we have all that just basically a checkbox away and in Hatchbox now. So you can monitor all the things, send over logs, aggregate those, you name it. It's all kind of tied in. And then over time, we're going to integrate with their API more deeply. And that way you can have like an easy link from the process right to the check-in to debug that or view the logs that are aggregated in AppSignal or whatever for database backups. If those ever failed because you ran out of disk space or some connection error or something, firewall rules blocked it, whatever. So I'm excited about that. It's a cool little utility they built. And I think they were saying like, it's a great utility, but trying to market that and why you would use it and where you would use it and stuff has been hard to describe, but like it fit perfectly throughout Hatchbox. So it's like, here you go. Here's perfect example of where to use this. And like it works with anything. So you could run it in your Docker container and have it wrap your Rails server or something too. So you could really use it anywhere. It's a cool utility. I really was impressed. And it's like not a terribly complex thing. I'm not super familiar with Rust and reading the syntax and stuff for that. You can hop in and check out the source code, and it's not that much because it's basically like, spawn this other process. I'll keep making sure that thing keeps running. That's really its job. It's cool.
How long y'all think y'all worked on that?
It took a little while because we needed to polish up some of the integration because that needs to run. They have two different types of API keys, which can be really useful, but also confusing. So there's one, they call it the organization level key. And that's what you typically install when you run bundle add AppSignal and you run their installer. It'll give you that key because what that key does is magically creates your development environment, your production, your staging, whatever. It reads the Rails environment and then just magically makes that in AppSignal. But we actually have to use the environment specific keys. So we ended up building it. They built an OAuth integration for us so we can then get the correct key. Because even though you might have an AppSignal API key in your environment variables, we can't use that because we need to give it to a specific environment and stuff. So it did take us a little while of collaborating with them to get the flow and everything polished. And there's still more to do. Because like one thing I'd love to do is we have, your list of deployments. We can then periodically sync in the background. Like it's been an hour or 2 hours or whatever. How many exceptions have been raised since that deployment? We can then grab that, save a cache copy in our app, and then make that clickable so it could take you to that specific view in AppSignal and you could see these are the exact issues that have come up since that deployment or whatever. I think that's a particularly cool thing because most hosting platforms are just about the servers and the infrastructure and that's it. But what you really care about is the application. And it's like, yes, we need the servers and all that. But day to day, what we actually need is how are things going on those servers? We need to know and observe that stuff. So it's nice for us to kind of like tie it all together. It's just something that I was surprised that like, as we got into it, like, why don't hosting platforms do more of this? It really should go hand in hand. And yeah, we're just at a very simple version of it right now, but long term, I think it'll be fun to experiment and see all those little things that we can pull in together and even automate more. Cause like right now, if you create like a database backup, it'll send over the logs and everything to a check-in in AppSignal, but you have to like create that check-in with the same matching name and cron syntax and stuff. So basically, if they add a API endpoint for us, we can just go create that and make sure the exact one exists, and it'll be seamless. And you don't even have to do any manual stuff anywhere, which is cool. So yeah, I feel like long term, right now, most of the hosting products are all just maybe overwhelmed with trying to maintain infinite scalability in their internal Kubernetes and SSL and all that stuff. They haven't even begun to really, and I feel like Railway does more of this than most maybe, but they have like observability and stuff built in. It's like, well, why do we need a separate Sentry or anything? All this could be all together in one place and really like integrated. So it's an experiment on heading that direction, which I think is cool. So we'll see what happens with it all, but it'll be alive by the time this gets published. So I'm excited. We'll see how that goes.
Congrats.
Yeah.
I just remembered something that happened to me yesterday that I feel like is actually worth talking about, where we use CSS bundling Rails. Although, fun fact, last night I was running Claude from my phone and I was actually able to get it to fully migrate over to Vite, and everything seems to be working. So I'm going to play with that a little bit more and see if that's actually like viable. But we use CSS bundling.
Yeah, with CSS bundling, are you using ESBuild or
yes.
What tool are you using?
We're using ESBuild, and specifically we're using Dart SAS to compile our like CSS like in development. So in development, you're running a process that's running SAS under the hood, that's watching and building the files. And that's all well and good. Yesterday, we had someone work on something and they shipped it and it like broke the production build. And we're like, why is this happening? And it was because of a libsass error, sass-c. And it was like, this syntax is invalid. Like, you can't do this. And I was like, what the heck? And so I didn't even realize this. Like, yes, we're running Dart SAS in development, but in production, we're still using sass-c Rails for sprockets, right? So there are some limitations of that, of libsass, which is what sass-c is using, I believe. And specifically, some of them are like, we can't really...
That got abandoned or something.
Yeah,
it's pretty outdated.
It's pretty outdated. It doesn't work with some things like specifically min-max. It doesn't handle that correctly in a lot of cases. And that was actually one of the cases where this broke. And I was like, this is so weird. I was like, why do we have to use this? Now, I found out there are Dart SAS Rails and like sprockets, like gems that you can swap out. And so you can get rid of sass-c. If you're running Dart SAS in development already, you can switch it out in your gem file for a Dart version, and that will work. And I was like, that seems like it's probably worth doing.
Yeah, that's odd because I would expect if you're using Dart SAS that, you know, you would run Dart SAS on precompile or whatever, and then those assets would be the ones used in production, but you've got sprockets in there as well. But I would think that, well, I don't know, some of the configuration stuff, the ordering and whatever that happens in production environment too changes a little bit, but you should be able to keep using CSS bundling, but you just have to make sure that sprockets or whatever is loading from the correct place or whatever, and that maybe off somewhere in there. But we've switched over to like PropShaft, and it's like, as long as Dart SAS spit out the files in the right location with hash at the end of it of the right length or whatever, then it will just serve those assets. So you don't run any risk of sprockets accidentally saying, hey, this is production, we need to compile this too. Because that I could see, like, it didn't detect it or whatever, so it built its own version and overwrote something or whatever. Like, gets confusing real fast. And that stuff is all kind of, I don't know, feels like a black box. Once you get into like the actual internals, it's not as complicated, but like debugging it feels like, I don't know what the hell is going on, how it detected this, how it output that, where this is coming from when it looks up the manifest and whatever. Like, I've had a lot of trouble in the past trying to wrap my head around it. And luckily, if you do get Vite working, like, Vite is phenomenal. It does all of that like painful stuff that ESBuild just refuses to implement for speed, and that's fine. But you also get the production, whatever they use, I forget, ESBuild and development and like roll up for production or whatever. They use like two tools internally. It's just a house of cards, though, at the end of the day.
Great series. Yeah, it's definitely sprockets that I don't even really understand what's happening, because at some point, like, I spent so much time working with Webpacker that once like CSS bundling and JS bundling came out, it's like, okay, can we just set this up and not touch it? And the answer is mostly yeah. So it's like coming back to, it's like, do I really want to like touch this thing that's caused me so many problems in my life up to this point? And it's like, not worth it. Right? But switching over to Vite would definitely be worth it. Like, I think there's definitely an appetite for that. So if I can actually verify that all this is working, like, I might be shipping this Vite thing.
Yeah, that would be awesome, because it's very well supported and Evan Yu does a great job. I think the thing I ran into real fast with ESBuild was like, oh, God, I have to maintain my own custom script to just do basic things like glob imports. And you have to do your own, use Chakidar or whatever the JavaScript file monitoring thing is, to do your own dev build watcher and crap. And it's like, you know what? Just use Vite. Vite does all that stuff for you. It's not that much more complicated. It's simpler, honestly. And you're not maintaining your own build pipeline for development and whatever. Like, that really quickly felt like, at first, ESBuild was so refreshing because it was so lightweight and simple. And then all of a sudden I was like, I'm maintaining these ESBuild packages, plugins. They just kind of randomly in these minor versions ship some breaking changes, and then it just stops working one day. So now I got to keep an eye on their, release changelog and periodically update my plugin and blah, blah, blah. Vite just will be so much easier at the end of the day. I bet you. You reminded me, I think Sassy Rails was the one that bit me several times, because they have an initializer for CSS compression.
That's where it broke, actually. I got the log right here.
I wondered if that was it, because
libsass Rails compressor line 29.
Oh, yeah. That's probably it, because what happens with the Rail tie in Sassy Rails is it says if it's not in development, so it could be test, staging, production, anything other than that, you get the CSS compressor enabled as Sass, unless config assets has key CSS compressor. And there was something like that where, like, if it's not even there, then it'll automatically enable that for you. So you have to define it and set it to nil if you want to like turn it off, but you can't just like not define it, because then it's going to be like, oh, you want the default, which is the Sass compressor. That, I think, was the thing that bit me several times, because I had to read that a few times, because it's like, well, for one, I don't like using unless in my code. It just never, I always have to reread it as an if not this.
I do
every time. And then this is confusing, because it's like, if not Rails and development, then this, unless that. It's like, okay, quite a few double negatives here. This is like 9-year-old code. So it's ideally, this is checking Rails and local or something, because this will like enable automatically in test environments too. But just development is the one that is ignored. So it's confusing. That one's a gotcha that hopefully we don't have to worry about anymore, because Sassy Rails is archived in October last year in 25. So you should get rid of that dependency, bro.
Get off of it.
Yeah, I'll just do that. Thanks, guys.
Done.
Yeah.
Just tell Claude.
Yeah,
The problem,
So
the
easy.
real problem is like, because what I think I ran into that for most recently, if I can remember right, was I think we had administrate in an application and it depended on Sassy Rails. My stuff was using CSS bundling or import maps or, some basic thing or whatever, that we weren't using Sassy Rails ourselves for anything. But we still got bit by that because a dependency required it. And that was our failing configuration there. That was what got me.
I think we need to title this episode Sassy Rails, because the fact
So
that
sassy.
so sassy, dude.
That would be a good conference name.
Sassy Rails.
Yeah.
Hey, you gotta bring the right attitude.
I think that would be a great conference name. Speaking of conferences, I heard RBQ went really well. Heard good things about that. And you are working on Blast Off Rails talk. Comes up when?
The conference is on June 11th and 12th
June 11th.
in Albuquerque.
Albuquerque.
Dude, I've been so freaking busy at work that I feel like I have no headspace to do anything but like mellow out at the end of the day. But I've been working on it, trying to work on it as much as I can. And it's coming along.
Good.
I'm not really nervous though. I live for attention, dude. Like,
That's why you're on the podcast.
yeah.
We know.
Yeah, I need it. So I'm not really nervous. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Good. I have the Front End Masters workshop coming up in May and Toronto Tech Week talk that I'm doing. And similarly, like, it's coming up. Very busy day to day. Need to start making time to finish up those or whatever. But like, I've also done that too, where I've been too early and then I feel done with it. But if I haven't recently worked on it right before I give the talk, I don't give as good of a talk if I'm like, oh, I forgot some of the details that I wanted to talk about here or there. I didn't write them in the notes or in maybe as much detail as I intended to, because I just thought I'd remember it. But then 4 weeks go by and you're like, I don't remember anything about these little nuances I wanted to talk about or I was excited to cover. So that's why you got to procrastinate. It's a good thing.
I'm great at that. I'm trying not to do that, but that is my specialty. That's my bread and butter.
Yeah. You put that talk together the morning of.
I've done it before. I'll do it again. Well,
yeah, that'll be fun. I'm jealous. I hope it goes well and you have a good time out there.
Yeah, me too. Well,
yep.
I've got Stripe code to work on.
No, you got Stripe code to tell Claude to work on.
I don't know about that.
The best thing is to vibe code your taxes and your payments code.
Dude, taxes. Ugh.
If you can vibe code all your things that have to do with money, then you're winning at life.
You're winning, son.
You're doing something.
Just round it down into my bank account. That's all you got to do.
There you go. Claude, make me rich.
No mistakes.
Yeah, no mistakes.
Yeah, no mistakes for sure. That's the critical piece of advice. Why don't they just hard code that into Claude code and everything? Why isn't that a thing?
I don't know.
I just automatically do that.
I saw a thing on Reddit today where someone was like, man, these vibe coders are out of control. There's like, this person literally got 4 warnings not to publish this, published it. Thanks for the API key, dummy. And it was like, you could see like at the top of this file, there were like several comments are like, warning, do not deploy this. Do not put this in public. Make sure you put this somewhere else. Warning, warning, warning. And still, guess what they did?
Yeah, we don't read comments here.
No,
we even need to read. If we're not going to read the code, why are we going to read the comments?
Yeah, see, you understand.
Yeah.
All right.
It's the only code I ship these days.
I will talk to you guys next week then.
Peace out, Girl Scouts.
Ciao.
Peace.